Time now to take another look at the morning papers. Here with me reviewing them this morning are the journalist and author Yasmin Alibhai-Brown and the broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. So welcome back. We've dealt with the front pages, some of the stories inside, but Yasmin, you wanted to discuss this hour an article in the Times about the growing reliance, they say, on overseas doctors. So talk us through this article.
Well, the first thing to say is that this is based on information from something from an organization they call a think tank, which it is not. Migration Watch is a self-declared partisan ideological organization which has been anti-immigration for a long time. So it's a bit like basing an article on how Brexit is getting on using UKIP experts. So we need to understand that. Having said that, the NHS has always had foreign doctors. According to this article, about 12,148 doctors from abroad joined the service. Now think about that. They trained somewhere else. The cost of their training was borne by other countries. So I find that quite odd, that instead of saying, how lucky are we, that we have this whole group coming in at a time when the NHS is in dire straits. And it didn't cost us anything. And yet there is this quite provocative article, assuming this is a bad thing. Also in the article, the Department of Health and Social Care says, we funded 1,500 more medical school places each year for domestic students in England. I find this article difficult, I must say.
Okay, and there are a lot of people who are pushing for more places, aren't there, for students at university to study medicine as well. That's another issue that is going to be ongoing as well, isn't it, Yasmin? So we've had a lot of heavy stories around in the morning papers, Lucy, but I'm hoping you might be able to lighten the mood for us next with the Telegraph article about caveman raves, apparently.
Yes, this is a very interesting story, partly because of from my own clinical perspective, there is a lot of research that's coming out now about the medical benefits of hallucinogenic properties, products with hallucinogenic properties. And what has been shown by some investigations of burial sites in Menorca is that cavemen were perhaps also using hallucinogenic maybe drinks or other substances which they had cultivated from plants, from things that they found growing around them. And that perhaps, according to analysis that's taking place on strands of their hair, which I'm absolutely fascinated by, I didn't assume that hair would have lasted that long, but what they've discovered is that the cavemen were either using it for medicinal purposes or they might have just been using it for their own general revelry. One has fantasies about what cavemen might have looked like if they were, getting wild on some of these substances. But what I love about this story is this timeline that shows that throughout history there have been ways in which people have harnessed the medicinal properties of plants, of herbs, for their own benefit. And what we're hoping to do now within medicine, particularly in regards to treatment-resistant depression and other forms of mental illness, that if we could really harness some of these properties for our own benefit, we could actually save a lot of money and have fewer side effects. So maybe the cavemen were ahead of their time.
Fascinating stuff, and thank you for leaving us with that image of partying cavemen. It's one I'm going to enjoy this morning. Let's move on and keep the mood a little bit on the lighter side as well, Yasmin, because we're going to turn to the Star's front page. Their headline is simply Mamma Mia. And what's this story about?
Well, there's not much text in it, but what they're saying is that the Italian Prime Minister follows the French in demanding a ban on English words. It's just so stupid, this. The French have been trying to do this forever. What makes English so extraordinary extraordinary, the most extraordinary language in the whole world, is that it isn't like this. It borrows, absorbs, steals vocabulary from everywhere, and that it's a living language. This idea that you shouldn't use any words that are not Italian. It kind of protectionism, it's like trade, the whole protectionism of trade. You can't do it. And why would you want to anyway?
I love the
Like I said, the French were bad enough. Now the Italians have jumped on this.
I love the fact that as you say, there's only about 10 words on that article, but it does say that furious Italian politicians are demanding their bemused citizens to stop using English words and pronounce bruschetta, bruschetta, well, I don't know which it is, properly. But you'd have thought they'd be able to pronounce it properly. It's us that doesn't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, let's move on to the Sun pothole in one, Lucy.
Yet another amusing story. I find potholes quite funny, but then they shouldn't be funny, because actually the splash on the front page talks about how 13 million drivers have had vehicles damaged, which is, of course, extremely costly. But I'm thinking also of pedestrians who can sometimes, twist or even break an ankle if you fall into a pothole. And the story here is about a 500-metre stretch of road in Wiltshire, where it's basically all pothole, and the locals have decided to turn it into a crazy golf course. But apparently they had to stop play because a car came along and scraped its exhaust along the bottom of the road. I mean, it is the most enchanting story, but I think it also speaks to the fact that we've got local elections coming up, and pothole stories always seem to occur in newspapers when local elections are looming and politicians are trying to get down and dirty with the local issues. And what matters most to many people is the quality of their roads and whether they can walk across them safely at night without breaking a leg.
Well, that's right. It is something that gets people pretty wound up, unless you live near this crazy golf course. Anyway, lovely to see you both this morning. Thanks so much for all your thoughts. Always good to have you on. Thanks.